There's a term, once a Marine, always a Marine, but there's also the term, eat the apple, F the core.
A recent report found that the suicide rate among American veterans has devastatingly increased by nearly a third since the year 2001.
For the second year in a row, more soldiers killed themselves than were killed in combat.
Why is the suicide rate so high?
The laws of decency don't apply to soldiers in combat. We come home feeling terrible, despicable about what we did and what we saw.
By our investigative team has uncovered a troubling and tragic epidemic among our military veterans, an epidemic of suicide. Men and women taking their lives in startling numbers.
They survive the hell that's Iraq, and then they come home only to lose their life.
23-year-old Marine reservist Jeff Lucy hanged himself with a garden hose in the cellar of his parents' home, where his father Kevin found him.
There's the crisis going on, and people are just turning the other way.
Kim and Mike Bowman's son Tim was an Army reservist who patrolled one of the most dangerous places in Baghdad, known as Airport Road.
His eyes, when he came back, were just dead. The light wasn't there anymore.
8 months later, on Thanksgiving Day, Tim shot himself. He was 23. Diana Henderson's son Derek served 3 tours in Iraq. He died jumping off a bridge at 27.
Going to that morgue and seeing my baby, my life will never be the same.
Beyond the individual loss, it turns out little information exists about just how widespread suicides are among those who have served in the military.
Nobody wants to tally it up in the form of a government total.
Why do you think that is?
Because they don't want the true number of casualties to really be known.
We wanted the numbers, so we submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to the Department of Defense, asking for the numbers of suicides among all service members for the past 12 years. 4 months later, they sent us this document showing that between 1995 and 2007, there were almost 2,200 suicides, 188 last year alone. But these numbers included only active duty soldiers. We then went to the Department of Veterans Affairs, where Dr. Ira Katz is the head of mental health.
There is no epidemic of suicide in VA, but suicide is a major problem.
Why hasn't the VA done a national study seeking national data on how many veterans have committed suicide in this country?
That research is ongoing.
So we did our own investigation, asking all 50 states for their suicide data based on death records for veterans and non-veterans dating back to 1995. 45 states sent us what turned out to be a mountain of information, and what it revealed was stunning. In 2005, for example, in just those 45 states, there were at least 6,256 suicides among those who served in the armed forces. That's 120 each and every week in just 1 year.
Those numbers clearly show an epidemic of mental health problems.
We're determined to decrease veteran suicides.
6,256 in 2005, 120 a week. Is that a problem, Dr. Katz?
You bet it's a problem.
Is it an epidemic, Dr. Katz?
You know, veterans, I had mentioned that returning...
Yes or no, Dr. Katz? Is it an epidemic?
Suicide in America is an epidemic, and that includes veterans.
I mean, this is so disturbing. So why, bottom line, hasn't the VA done more to track these numbers and help these veterans, especially those young ones?
Well, Katie, our sense from all the reporting we've done nationwide, they just don't want to look, because if they found what we found, they would have to deal with it, and they just don't want to deal with it.
But the statistics for veterans are shocking. 22 take their own lives every day. That's almost 1 an hour.
They feel powerless, they feel hopeless, and suicide, it's not that they want to die. They want relief from the pain.
Don't sit there and dwell on these thoughts and to the point to where you want to take your own life.
But, you know, this is a troubling report. 22 veterans a day.
Absolutely. You know, vets come home and they're told to wait in line for their disability claims and the benefits they've earned on the battlefield.
That some veterans come back from Afghanistan or from Iraq, and they're made to wait 100, something as 350 days before they can get the treatment that they need.
In fact, many come back to bleak situations. A quarter of the homeless in America are military veterans.
The Department of Veterans Affairs is once again getting heat.
There is no epidemic of suicide in VA.
This is renewing scrutiny of the VA following the 2014 reports out of the Phoenix VA hospital where dozens and dozens of vets died awaiting care. Now, the most recent internal report found that on average about 22 veterans commit suicide every single day.
23 miles in one march, 23 deaths in one day. Active and retired military personnel as well as ordinary Americans are sounding the alarm over the staggering suicide rate among U.S. war veterans. Half of all Iraq and Afghanistan war vets in the U.S. have suffered from mental illness, and an estimated 1 in 4 homeless people in the country are veterans. That's left many questioning whether the Department of Veterans Affairs is fulfilling its duty to look after retired personnel.
I think that the VA is not doing. I think they should be working to fix the VA more. Veterans shouldn't have to wait for any kind of care.
23 suicides a day is quite a lot, but it actually may be that this figure is even higher because only about half of the states in the country are required to keep that statistic.
When I found out the epidemic, it really hit home for me. I'm a combat medic, and it's what we do. We take care of others. And when I found about this, I had to get involved.
With the U.S. military now prolonging its presence in Afghanistan and engaging in ground operations against Islamic State in Iraq, there's no sign of a let-up in the flow of Americans to the world's war zones.
That America really needs to think about is our racism that comes from the United States towards Muslim people and towards Arabic people. And that's something that has to stop. And the United States has to start respecting people from the Middle East in order to find a solution to the problem that's been building up over many years. So I thank everyone for your patience and letting me speak my mind on that.
Specifically, what he told me at one point was that if you join the military and you're not a racist, then you certainly will be by the time you leave.
We decided to go in and do a mission to kill or capture them, and that's exactly what we did. They said, hey, you got to go get the bodies, bring them in, we got to ID them. We dragged them back, brought them in. Intelligence reported that one of the bodies that we were with, they all looked like, they were all just fucking dirt squirrels, man. Like, you don't really look at them as people. The big guy, one of the guys in charge was the IED cell leader. I don't really know how it happened. We were cheering at the time because he I don't know how much I get into it, but he was a high value target, or a person of great interest at the time. And I guess one thing led to another, and jokingly, 4 of us took a piss on him. Looking back on it, I know it sounds kind of taboo or distasteful doing it, but at the time it was just hilarious. It made sense. It was just another ordinary day. Like I said, people say we're Marines, we're better than that, but when you really get down into it, really start thinking about it, I'm a human being as well. And when you're over there and you are at the right place at the right time and get to perform your job that you signed up to do over and over again, I would say it kind of consumes you a little bit. Like you're not killing, I wouldn't say you're not killing human beings. I still don't look at them as human beings. I never will. You don't feel any empathy or remorse for them. And I guess that's going back to the whole pissing on their dead bodies. At the time, it meant nothing. It was just, I don't know. It's funny.
You would always hear like, who cares, it's just a Haji. And it was never like the market, it was always the Haji market or Haji video or Haji cigarettes, Haji this, that guy's a Haji, you know. And Haji is a term of endearment for someone who's a Muslim and has made the pilgrimage, the Hajj, to Mecca in their life, and it's usually an elder who is respected and they call him a Haji, but we use it in a derogatory way. Once I got into Army training, you know, basic training and stuff, and some of the scandals were coming out and things, and it was kind of like I started questioning it, but I still wanted to believe in the mission, I guess. But our training was more geared towards like everyone in Iraq is the enemy and everyone's going to kill you. And some of the like drill sergeants and stuff were from the Vietnam era, and it went from talking about you're about to go fight a war to talking more occupation, and that just didn't set right with me. And then leading up to our deployment into Iraq, we did a lot of training. We had very poor cultural training, and instead of being called Iraqis, they were always called Hajis, which is the same as in Vietnam, calling someone a gook, or the N-word here in the United States for African Americans. And it just didn't feel like a war anymore. It didn't feel like a peacekeeping mission, and I just lost faith. A lot of my friends have talked about doing house raids. They said it was easier for them to think of them as Hajis and not actual human beings, and tear their beds open, flip, you know, their couches over, and tear pictures off the wall and stuff like that. And it just makes it easier when you view someone as subhuman.
Good afternoon. My name is John Michael Turner. I currently reside in Burlington, Vermont. I served with Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines as an automatic machine gunner. There's a term, once a Marine, always a Marine, but there's also the term, eat the apple, F the core. I don't work for you no more. I served 3 deployments with Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines, one of which was in Haiti. The other 2 were in Iraq, in between Fallujah and Abu Ghraib the first time, and in downtown Ramadi at the Government Center the second time. On April 18th, 2006, I had my first confirmed kill. This man was innocent. I don't know his name. I called him the Fat Man. He was walking back to his house, and I shot him in front of his friend and his father. We were all congratulated after we had our first kills, and that happened to have been mine. My company commander personally congratulated me, as he did everyone else in our company. This is the same individual who had stated that whoever gets their first kill by stabbing them to death will get a 4-day pass when we return from Iraq. This man right here was my 3rd confirmed kill. As you can see, he was riding his bicycle. Later on in the day, we went ahead and we had CBS Laura Logan with us, but she was with the other squad. And so she wasn't with us. So myself and 2 other people went ahead and took out some individuals because we were excited about the firefight we had just gotten into, and we didn't have a cameraman or woman with us. With that being said, anytime we did have embedded reporters with us, our actions would change drastically. We never acted the same. We were always on key with everything, did everything by the books.
My name's Grant Collins. I'm a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. I was a corporal in 1st Battalion, 23rd Marines. Was in Iraq from August of 04 to May of 05. A few months after I was there, I mean, a lot of things weren't sitting right with me. The command structure, the missions that we were getting didn't make any sense. We're going after people, Mujahideen or Muj, and they didn't have any idea which ones were the right ones. We're kicking in the wrong doors, terrifying children, helicopters screaming over their heads at night, and I'm trying to calm the women and children, while the men were dragged and separated out and completely humiliated in front of their families. In that culture, it's a very big deal to be treated with respect in front of your family, just as it is in ours. But in this, I mean, it can mean a lot of shame. When I really, really, really came to the point where I knew that what we were doing was absolutely morally wrong was when it started lighting up this city like you wouldn't believe. Artillery strikes going in and planes flying in and dropping 500-pound J-down bombs into obviously civilian areas. I mean, my platoon was tasked with moving down a certain sector from the north side of the city, and of course we had to take every building block that we went through, and we came up to a smaller building, and my squad was tasked with taking this building, and the doorway, there was fire coming out of the doorway, machine gun fire, and from the windows. So I had an attachment of SMAs, which are rockets, a two-man team of rockets, and you can use these rockets to blow holes, make another doorway, if you will, in the side of the building. So I gave the order for them to use the missiles on the building. So we hit it, and then we stormed into the building, and there was two 14, well, looked about a 14-year-old kid, a 6-year-old kid, and a young, maybe this could have been her husband, I couldn't tell because he was so messed up, and a woman that was bleeding, but not severely, and all she was screaming, "Why, Laish, Laish," and I broke down. I leaned up against the wall, and as my rest of my Marines cleared through the building, and I sat there with the corpsman trying to do something about it. But I started to cry. I wanted to rip my hair out, what hair I did have, and go nuts. And the woman, seeing my reaction, came up to me and put her hand on my cheek and said, "Inshallah," which is God's will. Because these people over there, it doesn't matter what bad things happen to them, that they can accept it right away as God's will because they're deeply religious. But no, it wasn't God's will. It was my fucking order. I gave the order to fire those rockets into that building, and I killed her family. And that's when I knew that I was put in a situation where I had to do that. I thought I had to do that to keep myself and my Marines alive, thinking that, well, that was the best thing I could do at the time. Well, I have to live with that decision. And anyway, it's my duty now. It is my duty to stand up and speak, and I will do this until this war is over.
My name is Daryl Anderson. I served in Baghdad, Iraq from January 04 to July 04. But I'll start off with my progression in Iraq. It started with 9/11 because that's what led to the war. Like Dennis was saying, that's what fueled the fire. That's the big part of the lie that led to the lies I witnessed in Iraq. But all of a sudden in Kentucky, because there was some brown people in Kentucky were looking at me like I was a terrorist. Because I'm dark, I can grow a beard, you know, and I'm not as white as many as you people in the room. I'm white, but I'm not that light. So I started to feel a lot of that, like, man, people are, you know, they're worried about, they're going to hit Fort Knox in Kentucky. And I'm thinking, this is racism. This is what feeds the fuel that Iraqis are beneath us and we can go kill them because, look it, they killed 3,000 innocent people. They don't care about innocent lives. In Desert Storm, we couldn't get into Baghdad because the people heard about the innocent people we killed in the bombings. Now, 3,000 Americans are dead. We don't care how many Iraqis you got to kill. Killing the civilians is part of war. And that's what they sent us into Baghdad with. I joined in 03 because I was broke. I needed money, but I was a young American kid. I wanted to fight in the war. I joined up, month out of training. I arrive in Baghdad, Iraq, January '04. Saddam's been captured. And I get there, and the guys that I'm serving with have been there for 6 months already. They were there in '03. And I go, well, you know, I think it's come out that, you know, these people had nothing to do with 9/11. There was no Iraqi on those planes. We can see around here there's no Al-Qaeda, there's no terrorist syndicates in Baghdad or Iraq. Saddam had stamped them out. And I asked my buddies, well, you know, we're here to find weapons of mass destruction. And they laughed at me. And I said, well, you know, we're here to help the people. And they laughed at me. And I said, well, what's our mission? What's our goal? I thought we were going to find the people that did 9/11. I thought we were going to get these weapons of mass destruction. I thought we were going to help the people. And they're like, all we're trying to do is make it home alive. You roll into Baghdad, every single big apartment building is blown up. Every single apartment building in Baghdad has been broken to the ground by artillery and airplanes bombing. You cannot meet someone in Iraq who has not lost a family member. Could you imagine what we had done in America if in 9/11 everybody in America lost a family member? What would we be doing? Would we be talking about war? No, we'd be in the streets with weapons. And so people talk about, oh, these people killing American soldiers in Iraq, they're terrorists. Not terrorists, they're wearing sandals. And they got an AK. And they got 14-year-old boys building bombs to kill these American soldiers because we've killed their family. So we're done in Baghdad. We killed enough people. I was ordered to kill innocent people. We killed innocent people. When they shot at us, we shot at everybody. And now they're finally, now with this troop surge, they're going to put soldiers on every street like they're cops. Because we've escalated and we've let them do it. We've let them do it because we stood by and we've talked about it. We got to hit the streets. You got to stop paying your taxes. You got to stop feeding this fuel. Because if we believe 9/11's a lie, then why are you paying your taxes still? Why are we still letting these soldiers die? And me, as now, I won't even talk to politicians about the war. Because there ain't no point in it. Democrat, Republican, they're all profiteers of war. I've helped 5 AWOL soldiers in the U.S. since I've been back. Well, I spent 2 years in Canada because I refused to go on my second deployment. I came back, I got kicked out of the military. So that's why I'm here, I'm a resistor. Because we're tired of waiting. We're tired of waiting for the politicians to stop the war.
There's an interesting pathology I found when we got back. Nobody talked about anything at that point.
Everything we were told from the beginning was a lie about why we were there. We're being told that weapons of mass destruction. We sat on the outskirts of the city, on the other side of the bridge to Nasiriyah, and that whole night our tanks went in, and I listened to them raise the city. Tanks, watched the mortars fly overhead, gunships circling the whole night. What I drove through that next morning was just a mass graveyard. You know, we had to drive over human corpses the whole way through the city just to get out. And because they declared that city weapons free. You know, you do not have to be carrying a weapon to be shot. And so they changed the rules of engagement, and we went in and we shot everything that moved. And it's the same shit that was going on in Vietnam when they declared it, but they just called it a different name. They called it free fire zones. That was an order given from our high command and in direct violation of the Geneva Convention. Years later, I've now finally met my salvation, Iraq Veterans Against the War. When I got out, it was pretty rough for about a year. I just tried to forget about this war. I even moved to Canada. I just was so irate at the United States foreign policy. I felt I couldn't even live in my own country anymore.
Definitely been some war resistors and people refusing to fight, and people, filing for conscientious objection, and people just going AWOL. I mean, there's 40,000 people that have gone AWOL in the United States and since the beginning of this war, and that's a figure you'll never hear in the mainstream media.
To realize that there was thousands of veterans all across the United States that felt the exact same way I did.
Hundreds of veterans all over the country have realized that this occupation is not benefiting the troops, and certainly not benefiting the people of Iraq, and so we've been organizing.
We have an absolute moral responsibility to speak to the true horrors of this war. Not only raise awareness, but to actively fight against it and bring an end to it. The Democrats in America have absolutely betrayed us. They have no backbone whatsoever in standing up to this administration.
In the end, the Democrats have done us a favor, and as they truly finally exposed themselves, maybe there's some hope in that America is really awakening to the fact that these people have betrayed them and they're not about ending the war.
There is little difference, if any, between these two parties, and they're not going to end the war.
My name is Mike Preisner. I joined the Army, left for basic training on my 18th birthday in June of 2001. I was assigned to the 10th Mountain Division, and in March of 2003 I was attached to the 173rd Airborne Brigade and deployed to northern Iraq. So when I first joined the Army, we were told that racism no longer existed in the military. A legacy of inequality and discrimination was suddenly washed away by something called the Equal Opportunity Program, and the Army seemed firmly dedicated to smashing any hint of racism. And then September 11th happened, and I began to hear new words like towel head and camel jockey and the most disturbing sand nigger. The most overt racism came from veterans of the first Gulf War. And those were the words they used when they were incinerating civilian convoys. Those are the words they used when this government deliberately targeted civilian infrastructure, bombing water supplies, knowing that it would kill hundreds of thousands of children. Those are the words the American people used when they allowed this government to sanction Iraq. And this is something that many people forget, and we can't forget. We've just learned that we've killed over 1 million Iraqis since this invasion, but we already killed 1 million Iraqis in the 90s through sanctions and bombings prior to this invasion, so the number truly is much higher. I tried hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. And racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people, these were human beings. I've since been plagued by guilt anytime I see an elderly man, like the one who couldn't walk, who we rolled onto a stretcher and told the Iraqi police to take him away. I feel guilt anytime I see a mother with her children, like the one who cried hysterically and screamed that we are worse than Saddam as we forced her from her home. I feel guilt anytime I see a young girl, like the one I grabbed by the arm and dragged into the street. We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. It is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While all those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks in the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight. And the ruling class, the billionaires who profit from human suffering, who care only about expanding their wealth, controlling the world economy, understand that their power lies only in their ability to convince us that war, oppression, and exploitation is in our interest. They understand that their wealth is dependent on their ability to convince the working class to die to control the market of another country. And convincing us to kill and die is based on their ability to make us think that we are somehow superior. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen have nothing to gain from this occupation. The vast majority of people living in the U.S. have nothing to gain from this occupation. In fact, not only do we have nothing to gain, but we suffer more because of it. We lose limbs, endure trauma, and give our lives. Our families have to watch flag-draped coffins lowered into the earth. Millions in this country without health care, jobs, or access to education must watch this government squander over $450 million a day on this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war. I threw families onto the street in Iraq, only to come home and find families thrown onto the street in this country, in this tragic and unnecessary foreclosure crisis. We need to wake up and realize that our real enemies are not in some distant land. They're not people whose names we don't know and cultures we don't understand. The enemy is people we know very well and people we can identify. The enemy is a system that wages war when it's profitable. The enemy is the CEOs who lay us off from our jobs when it's profitable. It's the insurance companies who deny us health care when it's profitable. It's the banks who take away our homes when it's profitable. Our enemy is not 5,000 miles away. They are right here at home. And if we organize and fight with our sisters and brothers, we can stop this war, we can stop this government, and we can create a better world.
President Trump says he has a plan to significantly boost military spending, across-the-board cuts to other parts of the government.
This defense spending increase will be offset and paid for by finding greater savings and efficiencies across the federal government.
If the American people knew how much we actually spend on the military and how much we spend compared to other nations and how much we spend as a percentage of the discretionary budget, they would change their opinion like that. Like that. There's no way that when people learn that they're going to say, yeah, don't cut it. They're going to say, fucking cut it. What are you doing? We spend more than the top 10 other nations combined on the military. Over 50% of our discretionary budget goes to the military. We just blow trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars on it like it's nothing for no reason. We have 800 military bases around the world. It costs $100 billion a year just to maintain those. So if people knew, they would change their opinion on that immediately. I'm totally convinced of that.